Shabbat Shalom. Let's pray. Adonai our God, make the words of your scriptures pleasant on our mouths and in our hearts, that we may all have knowledge of your name and may study your scriptures with delight. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, who teaches your holy scriptures to your people Israel. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us from all peoples and has given us your holy scriptures. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of all revelation. This is Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Shabbat. It is called that because it's the Shabbat before Pesach. Today in Shabbat Tsav, we arrive at this auspicious time, the significant Shabbat, the first holy day of the biblical year. The name of this parashat is given the emphatic direction Tsav. It may not sound emphatic in English, but in Hebrew, God used this to inform the Kohanim that they should be especially careful in their service to Him in the Mishkan. This command, Tsav, exhorts the Kohanim to pay strict attention to the instructions that follow, as in when we say Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. This command tells us that the instructions to follow must be performed immediately and without hesitation. But these instructions were also to be passed along to future generations with the same impetus as had been given. Throughout the Torah, two expressions of speech are used specifically when mitzvot are given to us by God. One is amar, as in vayomer, and this denotes a softer directive. The second is deber, as in vayadaber. This infers a more definite instruction. In the opening words of this week's parasha, a third, much stronger word for instructions is used, the word tzavu. Tzav es Aharon ve'es bonav. Command Aharon and his sons. Command. Here is a question we might ask, and which has surely been asked by others. We are, after all, a people who ask questions. Why did a korban olah, a lifted or a raised offering, require the tzav directive to establish its importance? Well, this question, of course, leads us to other questions. Why wasn't this word used earlier in Parshat Vayikra, when the korban olah was first introduced? Why is the tzav command used only when the directive is repeated in this week's parasha? Why is it necessary to repeat the instructions for a korban olah in Parshat Tzav when it's already been given in Parshat Vayikra? Why was the emphatic term tzav utilized when discussing korbanot? Surely these are other offerings of their offerings of greater or equal significance to these which it might have been used with. Then again, perhaps the commands are related more to the Kohanim themselves and to their actions than to the actual offerings. And now perhaps we can arrive at some of the answers. Our scriptures are filled with statements that emphasize the significance of obedience to God's commandments. After his 40 days and nights on Mount Sinai, our leader Moshe proclaimed to his people from Devarim 10:12 through 13, "So now, O Israel, What does Adonai your God require of you? Only to fear Adonai your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve Adonai your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of Adonai your God and his decrees that I am commanding you today for your own well-being. God directs Moshe to say this to his people: My ordinances you shall observe, and my statutes you shall keep, following them. I am the Lord your God. You shall keep my statutes and my ordinances by doing, so one shall live. I am the Lord. Is there any question in your mind about the meaning of the statement? Clearly and emphatically, we are to fear God and to obey his commandments. In the 12th century, Maimonides published his Mishnah Torah, which literally means repetition of the Torah, in which he gave definitive form to the list of 613 mitzvot considered binding by the Orthodox on the daily conduct of all Jews. The Shulchan Aruch, which literally means the set table, written by Joseph Caro between 1488 and 1675, in the mid-16th century, he says that there is a legal code now that defines the specifics of conduct. He writes it down so others can see it and follow it. And this is still used by many observant Jews even today. If you think that Judaism is characterized by an emphasis on obedience to God's commandments, you would be right. The essence of our avodah, our service to God, lies not in theory or in belief, in dogma or creed, but in practice, in our day-to-day actions. Parashat Tzav contains a variety of comprehensive instructions concerning the way in which the Kohanim are to perform their avodah, their service to God. Included are meticulous descriptions of what the Kohanim are to wear as they go about their duties. Twice in this parashah, clothing is mentioned. Now, I think today we really feel that clothing is not all that important. Many people think that they should be comfortable, that they should wear what feels right to them. But here we have a section that deals primarily with specific clothing. Clothing is discussed as part of the instructions for what to do with the ashes of a sacrifice at the very beginning. And at the conclusion, clothing is part of the description of the public ceremony to invest Aharon and his sons as Kohanim. In the first instance, God tells Moshe to command Aharon and his sons to wear specific holy linen garments while they are clearing the ashes from the place of the burnt offerings. This may sound very strange to us, because after all, what would you wear if you were cleaning up ashes from a fireplace? Not your best clothes, certainly not white linen. So maybe you're puzzled by this practice, finding it difficult to understand why the Kohanim wore these clothes and why then they had to change into different garments when they took the ashes to a place outside the camp. So different clothing for different aspects of what would seem to be the same rather dirty job. Why not wear something that could be cleaned easily? Linen, of course, is notably not easy to clean. Or something maybe that was old and already showing signs of dirt and age. Instead of looking at the job, though, consider in whose presence the Kohanim were performing these duties. First, in clearing the ashes, the Kohen is standing within the sacred space of the altar in the presence of the eternal God. Wearing special clothing reminded the Kohen of his sacred, exalted role in service to God. The second act, the removal of the ashes, takes the Kohen into the community where he will be seen by the average people. With his change of clothing, he is reminded to present himself with humility before those in his community. The instructions to wear separate sets of clothing, one holy, one less holy, help to define the different roles of the Kohen, and they give him a more balanced sense of his purpose and his position. The Kohanim, after all, are just people, but they have been given sacred tasks that are critical to the well-being of the entire community of Israel and its standing with God. Instructions about what to wear for different occasions provided Kohanim with both practical and spiritual guidance. And again, we're reminded that these instructions are not suggestions. They are commands, and they come from God himself. Our parashah concludes with a dramatic account of the public ceremony in which Moshe anointed Aharon and his sons as Kohanim. By God's command, this service took place in full view of the entire community of Israel. It began, strangely from our point of view, with the act of washing, as Moshe himself bathed the men. From this position of humility, they stood naked as Moshe began the process of dressing them, fashioning them into Kohanim. Aaron was clothed first to distinguish him as the Kohen HaGadol, while his sons waited in public, unclothed. Moshe methodically clothed each man, adding each garment and each accessory one at a time. He followed this procedure with the sanctification process, adding droplets of oil and sacrificial blood to the clothing until finally they were transformed from their humbled, naked state into resplendently adorned Kohanim, ready to minister before God. The specified clothing informed these men in terms of their new identity and office. The process of dressing them in public served to transform them in the eyes of their community, before whom they had now become truly Kohanim of the Most High God. Shabbat Tsav reminds us that our mundane, daily activities can play a role in shaping who we are, how we see ourselves, and how others see us as well. It reminds us that what is appropriate in one circumstance is not appropriate in another, that context matters, and visual symbols, including clothing, create real meaning. We wear, for example, talits and kippot, and they are visual symbols that imply something. They imply that we are in a state of standing before God, praying. So why should we dress differently when we attend synagogue? As I've said before, many people have the attitude that they should wear whatever is comfortable for them. Comfortable clothing, maybe jeans and t-shirts, or whatever we like to wear to relax. may be fine for some occasions. But just as the Kohanim were told to dress differently to serve in God's presence, so we should think in terms of wearing clothing that suits our activities. We come to worship a holy and exalted God. If we were going to meet Queen Elizabeth, would we wear jeans and a t-shirt? So, as we come before God, we should consider how we can honor him in much the same way that the Kohanim honored him with their service in the Mishkan and the Mikdash. So how should we view the commandments given by God? How has Judaism responded through the ages, and how does this concern us? We're told what God commanded and how our people were to act while the Mishkan and the Mikdash were central to our worship. The modern Orthodox movement, which arose in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, was a response to attempts to modernize Judaism. Modernizing efforts included the Haskalah, the Enlightenment, among the Jews of Central and Eastern Europe that had attempted to acquaint Jews with European languages, so they were not speaking Yiddish, and with secular education and culture, with leaders like Moses Mendelssohn. This kind of modernization led to the Reform and eventually to the liberal movements. And although the Orthodox speak of the Pharisees as the fathers of their form of Judaism, in fact, they have changed radically from the days of Yavna, and they have moved far from even Talmudic observances as we observed in Destination Judaism. In the eyes of Orthodoxy's leading lights, God's revelation to the entire Jewish people at Mount Sinai obviated the need for either real faith or belief, or, for that matter, for kavanah. Kavanah means intention, even in prayer. And so one could act out the commandments given by God without even believing in God. It has become acceptable to practice Judaism with no real faith, no intention toward God, and nothing of the zeal inspired by a covenant relationship with God. In some cases, among the United Synagogue Orthodox and others, there's no actual belief in God. The guiding principles of the Reform movement, greatly at odds with this perspective, contain the statement, and this is the Reform movement: we hold that all such Mosaic and rabbinical laws as regulate diet, priestly purity, and dress originated in ages and under the influence of ideas altogether foreign to our present mental and spiritual state. Many branches of Judaism in the modern world have emphasized the spirit of the Mosaic commandments. They say, as it strives to regulate the relationship between the rich and poor, we deem it our duty to participate in the great task of modern times to solve, on the basis of justice and righteousness, the problems presented by the contrasts and evils of the present organization of society. Tell me, do you think it's possible to observe the spirit of the commandments without recognition of the need for true obedience to them or to the one who gave them? In sharp contrast, our Judaism, covenant Judaism, demands true faith, zeal, and kavanah, intention, motivation. In Yeshayahu 1:8, we're reminded, "This Torah shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. The prophet Shmuel wrote, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams." In Mishlei 3:5 we read, "Trust in Adonai with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths." Rav Yeshua, according to Rav Shaul, the model to which we are to be conformed, tells us that those who obey the commands of Torah and teach others to do so will attain greatness in the world to come. He goes even further. He requires us to do more than the most orthodox of his day, serving God with pure hearts and with righteous motivation. He said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments," that is, the commandments of God. And not everyone who says to me, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. What is the will of God? He's given it to us in Torah. Are we willing to do it? Rav Yaakov, in writing about Avraham, declared, "You see that by his mitzvot, a man is justified, and not only by faith." Avraham's faith is expressed in his actions. That is, with enough genuine faith, we seek to obey God. Rav Shaul wrote, "Be imitators of me as I am of Mashiach. Now I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions even as I delivered them to you." What kind of faith produces obedience? The answer is simple. The kind of faith that produces obedience is the kind of faith that is demonstrated by obedience. You might ask, which comes first, the faith or the obedience? God has given us enough evidence of his manifest and transcendent reality to produce faith in our hearts. Real faith cannot be kept under wraps, so to speak, but it must be demonstrated through our obedience. Think of it this way. A man loves a woman. What does he do? He goes as far as he can from the object of his love, and he never tells her in word or by any action that he cares for her, or he can't wait to let her know how he feels. He is longing to do whatever it takes to prove that his love is genuine. To which would you respond? Which of these is a manifestation of real love? If you have genuine faith in God, emunah will be demonstrated by obedience to God's commandments, a sign also of your love for him. The prophet Yeshayahu accuses us concerning Yehuda and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Yotam, and Achaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Yehuda. "Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. Children I have reared and brought up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its owner, and the donkey its master's crib. But Israel does not know. My people do not understand. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, children who deal corruptly. They have forsaken the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel. They are utterly estranged. Why will you still be struck down? Why will you continue to rebel? The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faint." Clearly, we as a people, the people God created for himself, the people he gave his commandments, have failed when it comes to obedience. But our covenant relationship with God is about more than obedience. It is also a matter of avodah, of service to God. How does one learn to serve God? One can wear the right clothing to come into his presence, but miss the whole point of obedience, as did the two sons of Aharon himself. One can serve, but not with the heart, without zeal, without emunah, and without kavanah, without motivation and intention. We must conclude that obedience requires training and long-term practice, not just a desire to please. By way of analogy, let's look at the training program of the IDF. Much thought is given to planning the basic training of recruits. During basic training, dramatically diverse individuals from very different backgrounds are trained to work together as a team for a common goal. All the recruits share the universal goal of defending Israel. But remember, they have different backgrounds and different frames of reference. Many are Russian, they've just learned English, or Hebrew, sorry. They've just learned Hebrew. And some perhaps not all that well. Some are Maghrebi, they're from North Africa. Others are from America or England or France. Very different backgrounds. The drill instructor's job is to blend them into a cohesive unit where each individual will support the unit. In battle, their lives will literally depend on how effectively they can follow orders, whether or not they understand the reasoning behind the orders. To achieve this result and to promote unity, individual forms of dress and behavior are discarded, and they are replaced with standard uniforms and calculated actions. The goal is a unit that thinks and acts collectively for one purpose and one goal. The Kohanim are an example to us, since we are called by God to be a nation of Kohanim, a holy people. The term Tsav was used as the Kohanim were inaugurated into the service of Hashem. Precise and specific instructions were given regarding the halakha of all the korbanot. The elite unit of Kohanim were tasked with carrying out God's very specific instructions. In this context, a command rather than a request was perfectly in order. There's a deeper meaning here. Immediately is the essence of the command. Do it now. As with the IDF, there might be time to talk about it later, but at this moment, just do as you are told. We have entered the service of Hashem by covenant. And I would like to suggest that this same type of thinking is a necessary component for every covenant Jew who wishes to serve God. Yes, we should strive to understand and find meaning in all of God's commandments, but there are some that we may never fully comprehend, just as we cannot grasp the qualities, character, and accomplishments of an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent God. Our avodah, our service, and our mission in life is to do and to obey with a sense of immediacy and urgency. If we fail to do, or if we pick and choose, acting only upon those commands that are fully within our understanding or those that we appreciate, we weaken our covenant relationship with God, and we make it nearly impossible to transmit our faith to others, be they friends, loved ones, or strangers. Obedience to God's commandments enables us to serve Him together, to grow in our faith and to pass our faith on to future generations and to converts. This is the lesson of Tsav. At God's command, just do it.